This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I take the time to remind you guys, as always, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well, give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review. It'd be very appreciated, very helpful. I'll see what you like, what you guys dislike, the ways we can improve, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media. So you can find us there, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. And it seems like there has been a lot of discussions about the Washington football team in the recent news cycles. And that's not going to stop anytime soon. The story that came out Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, I don't know exactly when it dropped, the exact time I should say, but late Thursday, had been, hype's not the right word to discuss, like, a topic. I mean, to discuss a story that had the allegations and the accusations and the information that this story had. But it was one that had been discussed. I mean, there had been people teasing it, I guess you could say, for days now. People all the way back to like Monday, or maybe possibly even over the weekend. We're talking about how there was like a big story getting ready to come out about Washington. It's a big deal. It's going to force Snyder to sell the team, all this other stuff. And everyone's just like, what's like happening? And there were like a lot of rumors going around. They're talking about they were paying refs off to fix games. They were talking about Jay Gruden was doing this. Jay Gruden was doing that. Jay Gruden benched this guy because of this reason and all this other craziness. And then we finally get the story and it's pretty bad. They weren't lying about that part. There definitely was pretty bad. Now, all the auxiliary stuff may not have been mentioned, but the story in and of itself paints the franchise as a whole in a disastrous light. So if you haven't read the story, it came out via the Washington Post, though that's behind the paywall. So if you don't have the Washington Post and you can't read it there, I know like most of the major news outlets picked the story up in some degree or fashion. I know Outline had somehow they were able to post like what the Washington Post had, like the story. That's where I was able to read because I also am not subscribed to the Washington Post, and I wasn't going to subscribe for this one story. While a big story, again, that wasn't make me subscribe level big. But yeah, now some things start to make sense. I know I didn't talk about it on here, but I think it was last week. It wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago. They fired like 2 pro personnel guys. And you're just like, that's odd timing. Seeing as like draft's over. The draft's been over for months. Like normally that's kind of thing, if you're going to change those kind of people, you would do that after the draft in theory, but then this happened like on a random June day, and you're just like, what is this about? And it was like a weird timing, but now again, you understand why, because one of the main pro personnel people was involved in these allegations that are discussed in this article that detail 3 team employees, including the pro director, the guy was the director of pro personnel, Alex Santos, as well as the longtime radio voice, Larry Mitchell. And it talks about their sexual advances, their unwelcome overtures, their comments that were overtly sexual in nature to team employees, to I don't know, the cheerleaders, things of that nature. And then again, also kind of it touched on and talked about how some of these, whether they were employees or cheerleaders, were told to dress in a more seductive kind of way in order to try to close deals with clients. I know this was a story back, I think it was the New York Times back in like 2018 that talked about there was a trip to Costa Rica. I think it was in like 2013. There was a trip to Costa Rica, and like basically all the cheerleaders, a bunch of cheerleaders there, they made them like do a photo shoot, but they were like forced to pose like at least topless or like in the nude, or just like with nude with like body paint. And then also they were told to perform favors for potential big name clients that were down there at the time to, again, obviously get them to give money to the team or support the team in some way or fashion. So I know that came out a while ago, and nothing, I mean, not to say nothing came of that story, because obviously it was a big deal to a degree at the time, but like again, Snyder was kind of able to keep his job. Some of these guys were able to keep their jobs. They never really, like, it made national news for a little while, but then it kind of moved on again. Like I said, no one was really, I don't want to say no one was fired. Like, cause I know one of the main guys, I think, he left the team. I think it was either, I forget, there was one guy that left in like 2018. But yeah, so you have to do that. And it's just like the entire situation is a whole mess. Like I said, it'd be too hard for me to like read through the article or try to like completely summarize the article as a whole. But I'll just read you a couple short excerpts from it. Well, before I do that, the article named one woman, one of 15 that kind of discussed this, that were willing to talk about this, though. Like I said, the other 14 wanted to keep their anonymity because of like NDAs that they had signed. I think they said a total of 40 current and former female employees with Washington had signed NDAs, which tells you kind of how much they were trying to keep this whole thing under wraps, which is a disaster. But yeah, so one excerpt I wanted to read was, okay, Applegate. He's the last name was the one woman that was willing to put her name in the article. Like I said, is one of 15 former Washington employees who told the Washington Post they were sexually harassed during their time at the club. The other 14 women spoke on condition of anonymity, citing a fear of litigation, as some signed non-disclosure agreements with the team that threatened legal retribution if they spoke negatively about the club. The team declined a request from the Post to release former employees from these agreements so they could talk on record without fear of legal reprisal. And the story involves interviews with more than 40 current and former employees with a review of text messages, internal company documents. Excuse me. The team owner, Dan Snyder, declined several requests for an interview over the past week as the Post presented detailed allegations and findings to the club. 3 team employees accused of improper behavior abruptly departing. As I said, Larry Michael, the club's longtime radio voice, and Alex Santos were included in those 3. I know he the voice guy abruptly retired like Wednesday, and it was like, why is he retiring all of a sudden? And you're like, oh, this is why, he's not going to get another job. So there's that. And also, another thing, these allegations that were raised run from 2016 to 2019, which is, again, a disaster, because clearly it had been going on for a while. Like, clearly, because that was the one thing that was kind of, that was mentioned in the article, was the fact that, like, Daniel Snyder and Bruce Allen weren't directly involved. Now, how much they knew or didn't know, is a separate point, but they supposedly weren't directly involved, which will kind of lead me into my next point, which is, I'm curious if and how they're going to try to get him to sell the team. Because there is a way that Goodell could do something, and I know Ron Rivera came out today and said that he was brought in to help change the culture. He's going to try to change the culture. We can't have this stuff happen in the organization, XYZ, and that is all well and good. But, as is clear by the fact that these these actions, these people were able to do these things to these women for over a period of 13 years. Again, that's just the time that was mentioned in the article. Who knows what was happening before that? All that stuff was allowed to happen because of the atmosphere or the situation or the environment. I guess that's the best word. The environment that Daniel Snyder created. Because again, everything flows from the top on down. So what is, I don't want to say cool, but what is allowed by the top will then trickle down, and then again people will kind of go on and do what they think they can get away with. And as I mentioned with the 2018 article, since I think nothing too big came from that in terms of firings and people losing their jobs and stuff like that. Again, please correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I don't remember anything that big. I guess people thought they're oh, okay, maybe we're in the clear. Because that was just really on the one Costa Rica trip. That nothing else really came up when it was obvious these things were happening back then too. So these weren't the kind of things. These kind of things didn't come up in that original article. So all right, okay, maybe we're in the clear. Maybe we just keep our head low. We don't worry about it. We're good. And if you read the article, some of the things that people are saying, I know there's a one text conversation that I saw posted on Twitter where a guy was talking about doing or touching a woman in an inappropriate way just because he was going to buy her food. He thought that was an okay deal. All right, I do this for you, then you let me do this, and it was just weird stuff. And people were strange. But yes, like I said, top trickled on down. And the reason why I'm curious to see how this is handled, because with Jerry Richardson, he kind of had to sell his team recently too, but he was involved in some stuff that he was directly a part of. Same thing with Donald Sterling. Donald Sterling had to sell his team, obviously, but it was because he was the one that was caught on tape saying those things. It seems as if Daniel Snyder wasn't involved in this. Now, again, I don't know what else he's been involved in. He wasn't directly involved in this. Granted, did he foster the environment that allowed it? Yes. But he wasn't directly involved. So I'm curious. But I mean, I guess the thing working against Snyder, I should say, is the fact that no one seems to like him. I think that's a part of the thing that's going to help him. Because, again, if you remember, I think it was 2 years ago, in 2018 or 2019, there was a story about the Mavs that kind of had a similar story to this, just a long period of sexual harassment and assault and things like that going on throughout the organization within the Mavs. And because Mark Cuban was able to claim ignorance to it, what he did know and didn't know, we will never know. But he said he was unaware, even though his right hand guy, or the guy a step or two below him that was high up in the organization that had been there for a while, was one of the main culprits of it. So that's kind of crazy that you wouldn't have known anything about it. But because and also because he was well he didn't have to sell it. It was just all right, he just did some PR, was able to did an interview on TV, answer some questions, and hired a black woman to come in and clean up the mess. And then it's just all kind of, I don't say it's been forgotten, because people do remember, and the people that were involved obviously remember. So it hasn't been forgotten completely, but no one's still trying to push the NBA to get Cuban to sell the team. So I'm curious to see how much power Roger Goodell is going to wield over Daniel Snyder in the situation, because even if there's a new head coach, even if there's a new GM, even if there's a new pro personnel guy, whoever, new radio host, the environment doesn't change until the top changes, in my opinion. And because of the fact that this all happened while Daniel Snyder was the owner, and again, I'm not gonna say he allowed it, because I don't know what he did know, or well, Bruce Allen's not there anymore, but I don't think. But this all happened under his watch, you could say. You have to there's no way for me to believe wholeheartedly that things are going to change unless he's not involved anymore. That's I was going to compare it to another team, but they're not on the same level, so I'll skip that. But like I'm saying, like, it's just like, you can't tell me you're going to fix everything but the main, arguably, one of the bigger issues, which is at the top. Like, you can't just try to fiddle with everything else and just hope that, like, oh, all the bad stuff that the guy at the top is doing won't trickle back down again, just so we have new people in place. Because again, if the people feel empowered that they can do this and not get in trouble for it, there's going to be this sick and twisted people that work everywhere, not just in sports. Obviously, though, sports is a very male-dominated industry, so and because of that, they are willing to say things and do things that maybe they wouldn't do in other industry just because they feel like it'll be okayed or people look the other way on it. Which is, again, why I think these guys acted like they acted. They did not think this was ever going to come out, or they would be named, or they'd even be fired for it. Just because if they did, then you wouldn't be doing these things. Because, like I said, like the article's very long. Would definitely say it's worth reading. Like I said, it was going to be too hard for me to just summarize it all in one segment. Because like that Santos guy was really nasty. I don't know what's wrong with him. Some of the things he was doing or saying to these women obviously it was disgusting, but I'm still just like, why, like for what? But yeah, I'm just curious because it's like, all right, because you had, and also this comes on the heels of the name change thing, where Dan Snyder kind of reluctantly did that, where he's never even like come out publicly and said anything about it. He kind of just like released the press statement, and then like that was really it. And so it's like this comes off the heels of that. And like I said, it's just like it's a situation where I feel like if you're a Goodell, you kind of have to just want to just like rid yourself of all of this mess. And like I said, not to say it's going to just all of a sudden you get a new owner and everything's going to be peachy, but like again, it's like you can't. It's like if it's story after story with the one franchise and there's one guy that's in charge, it's like, all right, well, maybe we should have somebody else in charge. It is one of those things, and I mean, again, you don't ever want to hear. You don't want to hear stories like this, but I imagine, the Washington fans have been waiting for something to come out to get Daniel Snyder out, and it's like this should be the thing. This should be the thing that is like, all right, like we can't still allow Daniel Snyder to be in charge of a franchise anymore. Like clearly, the like I said, the environment in there is toxic. The employees are toxic. The relationship between the employees, the male and the female employees, is toxic. The relationship between the team and the cheerleaders is toxic. Like it's like we need to get rid of everybody because again, clearly, what Daniel Snyder did or didn't know, we'll never know. But he was to a degree allowing it to happen because it was happening. Then again, so if it's happening under your watch, whether you knew or didn't know, if you did know and didn't say anything, then that's bad. But if somehow you were oblivious, that's almost in some cases worse. Because like, how did you not know if it's been going on for 13 years and people have all these NDAs that they have signed? And there were 40 women. This is like I was saying, this was they had interviews with 40 current and former employees about this. So again, that's not a small group. That's not a small sample size. Like that's a good. I mean, I don't know how many employees are in the organization, but that's not like it's not like 1 or 2 or 3 people. 40 people is a lot. Like that means it was a problem. It isn't just like this might not be just like a one instance or like this is just maybe this is just one guy. Though obviously the 3 main culprits in the story, but. Like I said, clearly, if it's 40 women, that means this was happening a lot. A whole lot. And it's just like, again, you need to do something drastic about it. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that's going to be. But you would think that, yeah, you can't allow the owner that allowed this to happen for 13 years come out and do this. Because instead, if you're a woman, how could you feel safe? I know Ron Rivera said that his daughter's working within the team now, which is good, I guess. I don't really know. again, just like, how could you, if you're a woman, how could you feel comfortable working in that organization if you know that this is the situation you're walking into, one where people just can do and say whatever they want to women, and it just nothing like, again, these guys end up getting fired, but I think they got fired because the story was coming out. I don't know if they get fired if the story is not on the horizon, because again, this was happening for 13 years, so this isn't just like a new this year thing. Like these details range over a long period of time. So it isn't just like I said, like, oh, there's a 1, like 2, 3 year thing. Like this was a problem within the organization. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what the NFL does in the next few days, weeks, however long it takes, because they got to do something. I don't know what it is, but they got to do something, because you can't just make it seem like this is okay for an NFL franchise to do. Because, again, it just reflects badly on the NFL. It reflects badly on everyone involved in the story. Everyone, I guess, but Ron Rivera, because he wasn't there. Though, I mean, I am curious if he knew about this. Not to say that would have changed whether he would have made a decision to come, but I'm just curious. I'm like, this is not something I would want to find out via text message from a reporter asking, like, oh, did you know about this? Like, that's not how I would want to find out that there was there was a rampant issue of sexual harassment within the organization I'm getting ready to take over. That's not how I would want to know. But again, we shall see what will be done, but I just know something needs to be done, and soon, because this is a mess. And like I said, recommend to all, read the whole story, because it's a lot. A whole lot. So yeah. After that, after we come back from this next break, we're gonna switch gears a little bit, tone it back a little bit, just switch gears. Like I said, I head over to the NBA, and still a serious topic to a degree, because Zion is out of the bubble for personal reasons now. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about him leaving, and kind of other people leaving that say they're going to leave or potentially leaving, and just how serious this is, how serious the NBA is going to have to take people leaving for personal reasons. Because again, these people aren't just athletes; they're human beings. They have lives. Things go wrong in everybody's life, from time to time. So they're going to have to adjust to some things, and this is a very interesting situation that these players and these teams are being put in with this whole bubble thing. So we'll discuss all of that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
The New Orleans Pelicans have announced that forward Zion Williamson left the NBA bubble at the Walt Disney World Resort on Thursday morning because of an urgent family medical matter, and that he intends to rejoin the team at a later date. We fully support Zion's decision to leave the NBA campus to be with his family, Pelicans Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations David Griffin said in a statement. Out of respect for the Williamson family, we will have no further comment at this time. If this absence lasts 7 days or fewer, Williamson will quarantine for 4 days upon his return to the NBA bubble if he has a negative test each day he's outside the bubble. If he's gone longer than a week, he will still quarantine for 4 days if he has a negative test for the final 7 days he's gone. If he doesn't have the required testing, he will quarantine for 10 days. Don't know anything right now from the standpoint of him coming back. Pelicans coach Alvin Gentry said, obviously for us, we're just supportive of him and his family and his privacy at this time. But yeah, so then more people talked about just saying that like they have Zion's back and everything. And hopefully he'll be back for them. But yeah, obviously we don't know anything. Don't want to speculate anything. Just going to say, hopefully everything turns out well for the Williamson family in regards to whatever it is, whatever the medical emergency is. But this just brought up an interesting, I don't want to say interesting scenario, but just interesting dilemma the NBA is going to be in. And this is the fact that, like, players are going to leave the bubble. Whether it's for family emergencies, whether it's for pregnancies. I know Dennis Schroeder came out earlier this week, I believe it was earlier this week, or it might have been last week, and said that he has a child due sometime while he could potentially be in this bubble, and he's going to leave, no questions asked. I know Gordon Hayward was like the same thing. I think his wife was pregnant, and he's going to leave for the birth of the child, and then, like I said, just come back eventually, whenever that is. Like I think that child's due. Yeah, no, due is always like relative because no one ever comes. I mean, I don't want to say no one, but most babies don't come exactly on the 9 month out date. Sometimes they're early, sometimes they're late. You never really know with babies. But yes, he said he's leaving, and like I said, it's just an interesting scenario the NBA's got to be in because it's going to determine a couple of things. One is going to determine how serious the NBA is about their restrictions. So, like we said, with Zion, if he's gone for less than a week, he'll have to quarantine for 4 days upon his return. If he has a negative test each day, he's outside the bubble. Which I guess he'll get tested every day? Is that what that means? Yeah, I mean, interesting. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how he's going to go about doing that. Like, obviously, you can get tested, but it's like, I don't know how many I guess somebody from the NBA must have won with him because, like, a lot of places you don't get the test results back that fast. So I don't know how he would know. Like I said, and then if he's gone longer than a week, he will still have to quarantine for 4 days. If he has a negative test for the final 7 days, he is gone. If he doesn't have the required testing, he will quarantine for 10 days. So like I said, if he's not taking a test every day that he's out, wherever he's at, I know his family's from South Carolina, but I don't know if that's where he's. Or I know he went to high school in South Carolina, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know if that's where he's at, or like maybe they're down in New Orleans or wherever. I don't know where he went back to. But I'm just saying is I don't know if that's going to be the highest priority of him is just making sure he gets tested every day. Like I said, so if he doesn't get tested, then he has to come back, kind of like the Rashawn Holmes things where like he left the bubble and now he has to quarantine himself for like 10 days. Like Zion got to do the same thing. And that would be unfortunate for both the Pelicans and the league because a part of the reason why they're bringing these extra teams was to potentially get Zion into the playoffs, in my opinion. Again, no, I don't know if they'll ever admit that, but from my perspective, that's kind of what they were doing. They're like, hey, Zion could be the next big thing in our league. How can we get as many eyes on him as possible and get as many games out of him as possible? And this was the way. So if he has to quarantine, if he has to come back and quarantine for these 10 days, it'll be interesting to see if they hold true to that. Because like I said, you could find a way to have him only quarantine for a few days, something like that. But I'm just saying, if he doesn't meet the necessary requirements, it'll be interesting to see because it'll be like one of the first real test cases because everyone else that has tested positive or whatever, it just hasn't come down or they come down late or something like that. Or they stay outside the bubble. They're not in. Like very few people have. I don't think anybody has gone in and come out yet. Like I said, outside of Rashawn Holmes has gone in and then left the bubble yet. And then have to come back eventually. And then again, if he doesn't, there's a chance he might not even want to come back. Who knows? Like again, how serious this family matter is. So that's a completely separate point. It's just that like he might not even want to come back, and I don't think he should be forced to come back if he doesn't want to. If it becomes that serious, and he's like, "Look, I have other things to worry about. I would hope everybody would be fine and understand that decision. But if he does decide to rejoin the team, I'm curious to see how strict they're going to, or how strong they're going to be on these restrictions. Because again, like I said, you would think they should be very strict on this because, again, you don't know who he's going to be around, what could happen, what he could be exposed to, and you don't want to have him quarantined for too short, and then all of a sudden now he brings it back into the bubble with the Rona, and that's kind of the whole reason for the bubble, was to keep it out and then not bring it back in. And again, if you have people leaving, that's where it get interesting. And so then, like I said, then the seeing how strict they're going to be on their policy is going to be one interesting part. Also, just going to be interesting to see how teams handle people leaving. Because again, people are going to leave. Like it's going to happen. Life is going to happen. I don't think all these NBA players' lives are going to be completely fine for these how many ever months that they're down there. Whether it's a short period of time or they're there the whole 3 months until October. Like, we don't really know. And I'm saying things are going to happen outside the bubble. Because, again, life just happens. That's just how life works. Things are going to happen outside the bubble. So I'm saying how these teams going to manage players leaving. Because, again, players should be free to leave. They should be understood if they decide to leave for whatever the reason is. And like I said, they shouldn't be forced to stay, and none of that stuff. They should just be like free to, I don't say free to come and go, but like just free to go and come back if they wish or something serious pops up. And I'm saying that is going to add another element to it, because I was always thinking of it from the perspective of like, oh, you have to manage like if somebody gets the Rona or if somebody gets hurt, something like that. But now I'm just like, how do you manage somebody leaving for a few days and coming back, and now they got to quarantine for like 4 days? So we're talking about missing minimum like a week potentially, and now that could be 2 or 3 games. How are teams going to handle that? How are teams going to handle a longer quarantine? Say they're gone for a while, and then now they're going to miss a couple weeks. Like, how do teams handle that? Like, that's going to be an interesting aspect of this season, and going to be an interesting aspect of how the season is decided. Because I think a lot of who the winner of this whole bubble is going to be, it could very well be, because obviously talent's going to matter, skill, coaching, different things like that are going to matter, but also just like who can handle adversity the best is going to be a big key, because like we said, there's going to be injuries, there's going to be rust to work off of, and there's going to be people missing. And we'll see. Some teams may get lucky and might not have any people get hurt or miss games or leave the bubble or have to quarantine, catch the Rona, or anything like that. But if and when those things do happen, the team that handles that adversity the best and is able to go through, I know I hate the phrase next man up, because again, at the end of the day, there are some people that like, oh, you kind of just can't replace. Like if LeBron gets hurt or has to leave or does anything, again, you're not just going to be able to replace LeBron easily. Same thing with Giannis. Same thing with like a Harden or a Russ or like a Kawhi or a Paul George or who else? A Jokic. Like they're just like their next man up sounds like, oh yeah, anyone can just step in and do the job. Like that sounds good in theory, but like there are people to every team, even like the lower teams. Like if like something happened to Chris Paul or something happened to Gallo or Shea for the Thunder, or something happened to Luka or KP for the Mavs. Like there's just like something happened to Ja or Zion, where they're not able to be around the team or not be able to play. Like the next man up sounds good, but again, it's just not that simple. And to me, at least, it's just not going to be like, oh yeah, we can just fill him in with anybody. It doesn't really matter. Whoever's available, like we'll just fill him in. Like no, there's a reason why he played that role and you play a different role. Everybody has their roles. You can't ask somebody to take on a different... No, you can't ask everybody to take on a different role, because not everybody's built for that different role. But yeah, I think a lot of this is going to come down to adversity and who can handle the adversity, and also just like how these players handle the adversity. Because again, if they got to leave and come back and they're dealing with something personal like Zion's dealing with now, or maybe they're dealing with like a pregnancy or a birth and things are complicated, things don't go just like completely smooth. Like how do they get out of that to then come back and then play basketball again after having to be by yourself for a few days. Like how do the players handle that? Again, we're talking about the teams, but it's also on the players. Like how Zion, he's still a young guy, still a young kid. Like if something serious happens, like how maybe he won't get his mind. Like I said, if he doesn't come back and play, that shouldn't be an issue. But if he does come back, like how will he be focused mentally to be on top of his game and to help his team do well? And I'm saying that aspect of it is just as important as the team adversity. Just like how well will these people or these players or these teams handle the different levels or the different types of adversity they're going to face throughout this season. I think that's going to be very interesting and very vital to the success of the team, and also just kind of how, like I said, the champion is won. Because whatever the adversity is, the teams are going to face it. Things aren't going to go completely smoothly, no matter what it is. So, again, in my opinion, the team that handles adversity best may come out and be victorious in this, no matter who that is. Again, that could be a high seed team, that could be a low seed team. It really doesn't matter in that regard. But it'll just be interesting. And like I said, it'll really test. It's really going to test these teams. We're going to test these players. It's going to test these coaches, having to make adjustments like that on the fly, and also going to test the league to see how serious were they about their protocols. Because again, clearly they were serious enough to suspend Rashawn. I mean, not suspend, have to quarantine Rashawn Holmes immediately after he stepped outside the bubble. But again, that's Rashawn Holmes. No offense to him, but that's not LeBron. That's not Anthony Davis. Like if one of those guys had done it, would they have been so quick to do that? Well, maybe they would have because those games going on. But like once games start up, are they going to be on top of doing a 10-day quarantine if they leave the bubble? Or are they going to try to skate around it? It's just, like I said, it's going to be curious to see how the league also handles this. Because, again, they claim they're going to be tight on it. They want to be tight on it. But when push comes to shove, will they? And that's just going to be an interesting thing to have to pay attention to. So, like I said, hopefully everything with Zion's family comes back okay and turns out to be okay. You don't want to have a young guy have to go through that, especially when his rookie season where he's already dealt with injuries and missing time and having to get back in shape. People commenting about his weight and all those other things. Is he going to live up to the hype? Like all those other things that he's had to deal with in his rookie season. So if you don't want to have to deal with that as well, on top of that, while going through a pandemic, while having to go down to a bubble and be without your family for months, potentially on end. Just like I said, it's a very unusual. Well, I'm not saying unusual because some people miss their rookie year due to injury, but it's been a very interesting rookie year for Zion. So, like I said, hopefully everything comes back okay regarding this particular matter. But we shall see. And so after this next break, we're going to come back and we're going to discuss Dak. This will probably be the last time for a little while. Oh, yeah, probably the last time for a little while. Because as we discussed in the last episode, he did not get his contract, though Derrick Henry did, so shout out to him. Running backs getting paid out here. Securing that bag. But yeah, Dak did no such thing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then also kind of this one guy was going through the different teams heading into next season. Again, obviously not this season because he's going to be on the Cowboys. Heading into next season that he could potentially go to if he hits the free agent market. Which, I mean, they're going to franchise that again. But, like, if he were to hit the open market, what teams would be vying for his services along with the Cowboys? So we'll discuss that right after a break. Stay right there.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So yeah, the Dak Prescott contract situation. The Cowboys, no one to blame but themselves for the predicament they now will find themselves in, because there is no doubt, almost no doubt, I should say, that by the time Dak is negotiating his newest deal, which he can't negotiate till after the season, Deshaun Watson will be signed to a new deal. They better hope, for their sake, they get a deal done before Lamar Jackson gets his deal done, because then now we're talking about the price going up and up and up. So then there was speculation about maybe this leading to a split between Dak and the Cowboys. I mean, he had the very, I don't know if PC is the right word, but very, company response, I'm with the Cowboys, I'm happy to be with the Cowboys, when they asked him about the situation. But his brother had a less positive response about the Cowboys. Talking about, just again, he understands why he wasn't a Cowboys fan before Dak got there and why he won't be one after he leaves. Todd Archer, a Cowboys reporter that works for ESPN, wrote an article about it if a divorce was on the horizon. I didn't read it because I'm not a Cowboys fan, but these articles were floating out there. There was also articles floating out there about how, and this is even pre whatever Rona affects the cap and has on the cap. The Cowboys cap situation is a little interesting when it comes to franchise tagging Dak, because now it bumps up $38 million from the 31 that he's going to get paid this year, which I imagine they will, because they're not just going to let him hit the open market, I would think, because then you're really in a bad situation. Well, again, unless he just doesn't play well, which, you never know. But assuming he plays close to the level he was at last year, maybe not as good, but at least close, you're not just going to let that walk. That wouldn't make any sense. So now we're talking about franchise tagging him, and once you franchise tag him, that money's on the books until you sign a new extension, potentially, and then you work something out. But they'd be on the hook for the 38, and it'll be on their cap, and then they have to restructure some deals and do different things, which, they probably have to do anyway to sign Dak. But, again, the cap situation, not great. And so, it got people thinking, could Dak be gone? And I've always argued that he won't be, though I also wouldn't have invested big money into Dak, so, but that's just my own personal preference. Again, not everybody agrees with me in that regard. Some people would have been more than willing to give him $100 million or how many ever million guaranteed. I don't know about, they weren't going to give him Mahomes money, obviously, but whatever guarantee they needed to get in order to make sure he was signed to the team. I wouldn't have gone that far, but again, when my options are very limited in that regard, and even in this next year, again, you're assuming you're going to be a playoff caliber team. So if that is true, then you're not going to be picking high. And like I said, that doesn't mean you can't find a good quarterback. Jordan Love went in the late 20s. So that doesn't mean you can't find a good quarterback prospect, I should say, because we don't know if Jordan Love's going to be a good quarterback. But you never know. I said, are they going to get Justin Fields? They're going to get Trevor Lawrence if they're picking in the 20s? No. Or picking in the late teens? No. Could they get a Trey Lance? Maybe. Could they get, I'm trying to think who else that's going to be that's probably my top three right now, because the other guys is the guy who transferred from Wake Forest to Georgia, I believe, Newman. JT Daniels transferred from USC to Georgia as well, I believe, which is weird. But hey, to his own, the guy Tanner Morgan from Minnesota. There's a couple of different guys. And then whoever just maybe makes that Joe Burrow type leap again, maybe not win the Heisman Trophy, but go from a 6th or 5th round pick to now the number 1 overall pick question. So maybe a late, not that high, but a late first round caliber. Who knows? Again, it's assuming there's a season, which there might not be. So there's that. But yeah, so it's just all right, the Cowboys are going to be in a weird predicament next year, where they may have to they're not going to let him hit the open market. But if they do, again, if it's just he doesn't warrant the extension after the season, then there's a chance, all right, you hit the open market and see what you can get, and then if you don't, then you'll come back to us, when you don't like the offers, potentially. Or, again, he leaves, the offers are there, and he signs somewhere else. Now the Cowboys got to start back over again. At least they'll know before the draft, so they'll know if they have to pick a quarterback. But then again, that hurts them when teams know that you have an obvious need, because then they know they can potentially trade up ahead of you, or like, I don't want to say exploit you, but like use you or try to use you in a potential trade if they know you want to trade up, something like that. If they know, like, all right, this team needs this, and this team needs a quarterback, or this team needs a tackle, or this team needs a corner, something like that. And you know, they're like, all right, if I'm ahead of you, and like we also kind of want a quarter, like, I don't know if he's going to be there when we pick again, so let me just pick him now, kind of thing. So that's what I'm saying. You usually want to try to go into the draft with as little needs as possible, unless you're, like, again, if you're in the top 10, you're going to have an obvious need unless you land a big free agent that you're going to need to fill. But like, if you're a team in the teens, 20s, you would hopefully not be going in with any huge glaring holes on your roster that needs to be fixed. So then, like I said, you can kind of try to go like best player available, kind of like they did in the splash draft. Like, did they need a receiver? No. Did they? I mean, they needed a third receiver, but they could have got a third receiver in the third, fourth, fifth round. Like, you didn't need to get him in the first. But when they picked, CeeDee Lamb was the best player on their board. So I was like, why pick anybody else? Then they also kind of needed another corner. They were able to get another corner in the second round, able to get some defensive line help. Like, so they were able to get a new center. So they were able to kind of fill their holes. But you guys, neither here nor there. That's not the main point of this topic. It was going to be Dak. So I know somebody kind of broke down the NFL teams based on like where they're going to be at next year, whether it's like quarterback wise or like team wise, that could potentially be good fits or good destinations for Dak if he were again to leave in free agency. So obviously the obvious ones where he's not going to be are with like the Packers, because they have Aaron Rodgers, plus they drafted somebody in 2020, i.e. Jordan Love. He's not going to be with the Chiefs, not going to be with the Seahawks, not going to be with the Ravens, not going to be with the Texans, not going to be with the Falcons, probably not going to be with, well, definitely not going to be with the Cardinals or Bengals either. All these guys either have a star quarterback or just drafted a quarterback recently. Rams, Eagles, Vikings, Titans, all kind of in a similar boat. I don't know. You would argue he's better than all those guys, but at the same time, they have big money tied to quarterback, at least through like 2022. So they're not going anywhere. So now you get to the flip side of things, and like obviously Cowboys, that one makes total sense. But the Bears could be an interesting one. Now, I know Nick Foles is under contract for at least another year, if not more. Let me actually double check that how much he's left on his deal. I know they reworked his deal, so he's not making as much money, but still, I don't think it's completely like. I don't think it's completely. I don't think they're completely out of the water after this next upcoming season. Yeah, so their next potential out is in 2022. No, after 2021 season, I should say. But at the same time, like, they're not paying that much for him, which is due to the restructure, which is good for them. Like, his total, like, dead cap hit, and this year his total cap hit in general is 5.3 this year, and 9.3 next year, and then 9.3 the year after that. But his dead cap will only be 6, so they could cut him. But yeah, he's not like making that much money, though. I'd argue, I don't know if you want to pay a backup quarterback $10 million. I don't know if it's a good use of resources, but hey, who knows? Maybe that's just me. But yeah, so you got the Bears, and I mean, you could argue if he's on the Bears right now, they're a Super Bowl contender as opposed to just being a fringe playoff team at this moment. Though obviously the line's not as good as it is in Dallas, the running game's not as good as it is in Dallas, so there's that. But I mean, the weapons are good, and they have a great defense. They have much better defense than Dallas has, so they don't really need a whole lot from their quarterback. They just need him not to be terrible. So you got them, and then there are a couple other interesting ones: the Colts, Steelers, Bucks, and Saints. There's a couple other teams that this guy has thrown in there. And the only one I really like is the Ravens. I mean, the Raiders. Excuse me, not the Ravens. Ooh, no, not the Ravens. The Raiders and the Patriots. So, you look at the Colts, Steelers, Bucks, and Saints. All those guys have an old quarterback. So, you got Colts, have Phillip Rivers on a one-year deal. Obviously, still have Jacoby Brissett, but they could be looking for a new quarterback next year, depending on how the season goes. Same with the Steelers. Obviously, I forget how much longer Big Ben's going to be. They are officially due to the contract, but again, he's floated with retirement. He's older. This came off a year-long injury. That they could be potentially looking, whether it's through the draft or through free agency, to be looking for his successor. With the Saints, obviously the same thing. Drew Brees came back for this 1 year, but you don't know who, or you don't know who's going to be the guy next year. Again, they think it could be Jameis. That they talked about it being Taysom Hill. But maybe if Dak's there, like, I don't know if they would, if he was on the table, I don't know if they'd be completely against it. And then, like I said, a similar thing with the Bucks, where, like, you got Brady for 1, maybe 2 years. So, again, if he decides to hang it up after you, and then you're starting from square one as well. So they could be another team that would, and you have all the pieces there. You have Mike Evans. You have Chris Godwin that are going to be there for a long time. You brought Gronk back, though. Don't know how much longer he'll be there, but you got him. You drafted an offensive tackle. You got a good piece on the defense that are young, with Devin White and some of their corners that they've drafted recently. So you have some interesting pieces that you can utilize Ronald Jones if he can make that next step or take that next step as a running back this year for the team. So you got some good pieces there, and you might just need a quarterback. And their defense wasn't even that bad last year, with a lot of inexperienced guys playing out there. So you give those guys more experience, and you bring in a young guy that you know is going to be there for a while. Like I said, Brady's just really just a Band-Aid for the moment that you hope, like, all right, eventually we can find a guy. But for the time being, we're just going to have Tom Brady, the GOAT, so you're not going to turn that down. So yeah, so those are all 4 interesting ones. And the other 2 ones, like I said, the Raiders are an interesting one because there was talks about whether or not they wanted to keep Derek Carr around this offseason, and if he has another bad year or they struggle again, they could be looking for a way to get out from under him and potentially find another guy. They brought in Mariota to be the backup, or potentially be like the Ryan Tannehill for the team and be the backup. And if things aren't going well, maybe you can put him in and he could get hot and win you some games. And then the Patriots will just, because Cam's only on a 1-year deal, and I know they have like Stidham and like Brian Hoyer behind him, but like neither of those guys are ready. Well, Brian Hoyer's a career backup, and that started here and there. And then Jarrett Stidham was a 6th-round pick, or no, I think it was a 4th-round pick. I think we went over this already. I don't think he went in the 6th, which I thought he did. But he actually went higher than that, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he was a where is it? He was a 4th-round pick. Yeah, so just like that. Funny enough. But yeah, so they could be in the market for a quarterback next year, depending on how the Cam experiment goes. So there'll be options out there, which is, again, why the Cowboys should have just got the situation handled and got the deal signed. And it sounds like they had a deal they were trying to get at the last minute, didn't really work. Yeah, who knows how true or false that is. Some people just say that maybe just to like make them seem like they were trying. You never really know with these rumors that float out there, because you got to think about like who does this benefit getting out there. But yeah, it's just interesting the fact that they weren't able to get something done, and now they're going to be right back here in the same situation next year. And again, you don't want your team to do bad if you're the front office. You want the team to do well. You want the team to go deep in the playoffs, potentially even win a Super Bowl. But then if that happens, then now you're going to have to pay even more money for Dak when you didn't want to pay him what he wanted already. And like I said, if the number keeps going up, it's like, why would you want to pay more? In theory. Again, we'll see what they do, but in theory, if you were like, we didn't want to pay this guy X amount of money before, like, why would you then want to pay him even more a year from now? It doesn't make any sense to me. If you were willing to do that, you would have just paid him beforehand, and then not risk him playing well again this next season, then having to bring him or give him more money after the fact. So we'll see how this plays out over the season. Again, cross our fingers that there is a season. But it's all just kind of a mess. The fact that they're even in this predicament in the first place. Don't know how they got here. But yeah, hopefully something can change for them when they do the negotiations next offseason. And speaking of change, Alex Rodriguez had some interesting comments about some changes he would like to see made to the way the MLB contracts and the salary, or I guess there really is no salary cap, so the way a salary cap could be handled, and the union kind of pushed back on those comments because they're like, why would we do that? But yeah, so we'll talk about A-Rod's comments, what he said, and like again, the pushback he got, and like my opinions on it. So discuss all that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
We are now here with the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. Alex Rodriguez was among the bidders for the possible purchase of the New York Mets, called for baseball players to accept the revenue or the type of revenue sharing system that is tied to a salary cap, and sparked quite opposition from the union. Following the collapse of labor talks dealing with the fallout of the pandemic, that Rona, relations between the MLB and the Players Association are at the lowest point in a quarter century. The sides appear headed to a spring training workout in 2022, preparing for the start of his third season as an analyst on ESPN. On ESPN Sunday Night telecast, Rodriguez said players have leveraged, or their leverage has changed since they fought the owners for the salary cap proposal with the 7.5 month strike back in 95, 96. So yeah, things are not exactly the same as they were back in the day. He said that the rise of the NFL and the MLB and the change of the equation have changed the equation along with digital media, and said the Players Association should work collaboratively with MLB to raise the sports market share. The only way it's going to happen is if they get to the table and say the number one goal, let's get from 10 to 15 billion, and then we'll split the economics evenly, he said Thursday during a conference call. But that's the type of conversation, instead of fighting and fighting against each other, because there's too much competition out there right now. I think I said that right. Baseball players have resisted the salary cap and revenue sharing approaches used by the NHL, NBA, and NFL. Alex benefited as much as anybody, from the battles this union fought against owners, repeated attempts to get a salary cap. Union head Tony Clark said in a statement, now that he is attempting to become an owner himself, his perspective appears to be different, and the perspective does not reflect the best interests of the players. Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred unilaterally announced a 60-game schedule this year, as the union kept open the possibility of filing a grievance, accusing teams of negotiating in bad faith, which they did. So there's that. The union lost a grievance this year, accusing the Chicago Cubs of manipulating the service time of star third baseman to delay his eligibility for free agency, which they did, and have a pending grievance charging several teams of failing to properly use proceeds from revenue sharing plan among the big league clubs. Rodriguez made about almost $450 million in his big league career, and obviously. He debuted with Seattle in July 1994 and was sent back down to AAA 10 days before the strike started on August 12th. He maintains an understanding that the leverage of the players in 1994 was wholly different than now, which may or may not be true, mainly because As he said, baseball is number one at that point today. The NBA has become an international conglomerate. The NFL is a juggernaut. Back then, there was no Netflix, no Snapchat, no Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, and everything they're doing to attract their attention. So today we have to really work collaboratively with the players and the owners to say, how do we compete together to become number one? Decently fair point, in all honesty. So, yeah. So there's interesting points on both sides there. You could definitely argue that the way in which the salary, or which the cap, or I guess the no cap, is set up in the league definitely benefited guys like A-Rod, because he was able to get big contracts from multiple teams that maybe you wouldn't get with a salary cap. So that's definitely true. There's also the point of, like, now he's going to become an owner, so he's like, let me not have to pay these guys as much, or we'll let us split the revenue differently, so they don't have, like I said, so you have to pay these players $200+ million contracts. I'm trying to think, on the Messi, we don't have any the biggest contracts, probably DeGrom, but even that's not like that big. Like, yeah, they don't really have any, like, big contracts currently. Again, they've had them in the past, they haven't really worked out, but they don't have any currently. So yeah, that's another fair point. That now he wants to become an owner. Now he all of a sudden doesn't like the way the players are played. Now he wants things different. Blah blah blah. That's a very fair point, and I feel like that's a completely logical point, and that's completely reasonable for him, his perspective, to be like, maybe we should change the way we do this. Like, again, if I'm about to be on the opposite side, I'm not, and he's not saying that I don't think he's saying that to necessarily take money away from the players. I think he just says that the way in which the players and the owners operate when it comes to negotiations between one another was normally not good. Mainly because the owners try to cheat the players whenever they can. Which is, I mean, as we saw in the negotiations for this upcoming season, has proven to be true. I don't know how that grievance is going to go that they filed, but I mean, you would definitely, in my opinion, again, I'm not even on the inside of the negotiation, just from what I saw reported, what I've heard, or what I've read, or what I've seen, like, talked about, it seems as if the owners kind of just negotiated not in good faith. Like, it seemed like they made it sound like outwardly like, oh yeah, we want to have a season, but at the same time they were like, how could we delay the season as much as possible so we don't have to pay them that many games? Or for that many games, I should say. And like I said, this is only going to lead to the potential strike in 2022, so A-Rod trying to get ahead of that, which I understand. But also, and again, try to support his points a little bit, it is kind of weird that they don't have a salary cap officially. I know they have like that luxury tax or whatever that you can't necessarily go over. I believe is how that works. I'll look that up in a second. But, yeah, they're the only major sports league without a salary cap, which is kind of weird. Definitely kind of weird. So just a quick explanation of how their luxury tax works. So the Major League Baseball is the only major sport in the United States without a salary cap, but with free agency moving into glacial pace for the century season, there's a growing concern among players that the league's luxury tax has morphed into one, which I mean it basically has. Each season, clubs that exceed a predetermined threshold, whatever it is, must pay a luxury tax on each dollar spent above that threshold. Only in 2018, only two teams paid the luxury tax, which were Boston and Washington, and those two teams paid a combined $14.4 million in taxes, the lowest amount ever paid under the current system. And after paying the tax for 15 straight years, the Yankees avoided it that past season, because this article was written in January of 2019. So they might be back in it now with the whole Garrett Cole contract. But yeah, so from a bigger picture perspective, some players believe that the owners are using the luxury tax as a convenience use to keep payrolls down, with front offices going out of their way to talk about the tax publicly like it's a horrible thing, when in reality it's peanuts. For going nearly $50 million over the last year's luxury tax, this was in 2017 season. The Red Sox were only taxed just under $12 million, which, in relatively speaking, is nothing. Especially the way like the NBA and like their luxury tax works. So, Yeah, so I mean, they already kind of unofficially have a cap, like I said, with the luxury tax. That's why you saw guys like Mookie Betts get moved, or why you see the teams like when Manny Machado and Bryce Harper were hit free agency, teams were reluctant to sign them because they're like, we're not trying to pay all that money and go over this luxury tax. Even though, again, you go over the luxury tax, you're not like $12 million is still $12 million, like the rest of us have to pay. Like, it's not like nothing. But at the same time, it's not like a lot. It's not like they're paying $50 or $100 million in luxury tax. Like, they're worried about that. They're just not trying to pay anything. And so now you officially put a cap in. Now they're like, all right, now you know that they can't pay anything, or that you can't pay anything above that. And then again, like the NBA has, they still have a luxury tax where if you go over, then you have to pay extra money. So you can go over. It's just that like you have to be willing to pay extra money. And then if you go over enough years, you pay a repeater tax, and very difficult to completely understand. I'm not going to try to understand it personally. I mean, I'm not going to try to explain it on the podcast personally, because I don't completely understand it. Some capologist or someone better with the financial side of sports who should explain it to you guys. I don't want to get things wrong. But yeah, it's just interesting because, like I said, the MLB is the only one without one. So it's like, all right, should they get one? And it's like, probably. Because again, as we've seen, the owners are just being cheap now, as we found out. And again, we learned that in these negotiations, just the fact that like the money that there is to be made when it comes to baseball is not what it used to be. But I think that's part of the problem, is because it's not as popular as it used to be. And again, when you have the NBA, it's an international business, or you have the NFL, which is basically the biggest, I would argue, probably the biggest sport in America. I mean, 100 million people watch Super Bowl just about every year. It's the biggest like TV show every year, no matter who the teams are that are playing. Everybody tunes in again because it's a one day a week. It's a kind of an event. Well, the Super Bowl is an event, but like since the sport is only one day a week, it kind of holds its own day. Mainly being Sunday, but then obviously they expanded to Mondays as well, and then you got the Thursday night football and Saturdays for college and for the playoffs or late season stuff. So again, everybody knows that if you're a football fan, just Sundays are for football. Like that's it. You don't worry about anything else. You're focused on that. And like I said, no other sport really has that hold where it's like, even like basketball where they have big TNT games on like Thursday. But because they have ESPN games on Wednesday and Friday, and then they have TNT games on Tuesday, like it's just that like it's not as exclusive, you could say, and that's why each game isn't as big, especially once you get into the playoffs and stuff like that. And also the playoffs being one game kind of changes that as well. So it's like when you look at baseball, it's like they're kind of falling behind, and I'm not saying it's because they don't have a salary cap, but they're falling behind. And that's why you see owners not being willing to invest the type of money that they would normally have invested. Because before, I mean, Boston, the Yankees, whoever it was, they would have been fine paying a luxury tax. But now they're like I'm not trying to pay any more money than I have to. Like, you don't trade the best player on your team, one of the best players in the league, as like a salary dump, really, for any other reason than just you don't want to pay money. And I'm not saying that's exactly what Boston did, but like again, them trading him, especially at this point, made no sense. Like before this next season, made zero sense. Other than like we just don't want to even think about having to pay him. So we're just get him off our team, get some prospects back, like we'll be fine. Plus we got rid of David Price too on top of that. And the Dodgers was like, shoot, we'll take him. We're trying to win World Series over here, baby. Like we'll take that in a heartbeat. Like, they're not worried about that money in the same regard. I mean, they traded for Manny Machado the other year. Like they were always making acquisitions to try to help them win a World Series. It hasn't happened, but they're giving it a shot. Same with the Astros. They were like, I mean, granted they didn't pay Garrett Cole, but part of that was because Garrett Cole wanted to leave. But they were like, all right, we'll trade for Justin Verlander, keep him. We'll trade for Garrett Cole, try to keep him. We'll trade for Zach Greinke. Like we don't care how much these guys cost. Like we're trying to win. And then we'll go from there. So yeah, just like everybody's a little bit different, but I think having an official salary cap and kind of splitting the revenue that way, so then in theory everybody's getting, potentially it allows you to bring in more money, just because, again, more, I guess, like, I don't know how their TV deals work or things like that. Obviously, like, that's where a lot of the NBA money comes from. That's where a lot of the NFL money comes from, is in those TV deals. And I don't know if you can negotiate them better, or then if you negotiate them better, you're able to split them better with the salary cap or things like that. But it just seems like it is kind of strange that they don't have one, even though they have a fake one now. So it's like, if you already have a fake one, you might as well just have a real one, in my personal opinion. Again, players won't be happy about that, because then it caps their salary. Obviously. That's literally the whole point. But, like I said, then it kind of limits the amount of money they can make, even though it's not like, it's not hurting LeBron, it's not hurting Steph, it's not hurting Mahomes, it's not hurting any of these players in other sports where there is a salary cap. They're still making big money. Granted, they're not making baseball money, but they're still making big money. But then again, you would think, all right, then that would allow them to not have to exploit your service time or things like that, where they like what they did with Chris Bryant, or they've done with some teams have done with other guys, where you like, all right, we won't bring him up to a certain date so he doesn't count for this year, and now we get him an extra year where you can pay him cheap before he hits his big salary, before he gets the free agency. Like, that kind of stuff wouldn't happen. You would think under salary cap, where they can negotiate to where that wouldn't happen. You just get, like, all right, once you get called up, you have, like, there's no, like, they would be able to take that out. I don't know exactly how it would work. But they'd be able to take that out so you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff anymore. Again, maybe it's just me. Like I said, I don't know exactly how it would work, but I think, like, maybe with a salary cap, you could work that in, because the whole reason why teams do that is so that they can keep the guy cheaper longer, so they don't have to pay as much money. But again, if you're hard capped at a certain number, and then, like, you can't really go over this, and if you do, then you have to pay money. Then again, it's basically what they have now. They just call it something different. They just call it a luxury tax, and like I said, it's not that expensive, relatively speaking, for these billionaires. Obviously, it's expensive for everybody else, but for these billionaires that can afford it, you would think they're like, all right, I'll pay a little $10 million here if that means my team's going to be good, or a little $20 million, whatever. Like, as okay, I'm going to make that back if I'm the Yankees, or if I'm Boston, or I'm the Dodgers, or I'm the Astros. Like, I'll make that money back in another way. And yeah, I'll be all right. So yeah, just all kind of relative, but it was just interesting to see how that goes. I don't think that would ever work, because the players wouldn't go for it, but I mean, it's something I imagine has been discussed, and probably will be discussed, and might potentially be on the table when they go to negotiations before, and well, I guess after the CBA is up. But it's like, yeah, I mean, every other sport has, like, why does baseball have to be different? Especially, like I said, when they basically have one now. That's the way the owners are treating it. Like, they have a salary cap, so it's like, might as well just put in the salary cap. But again, like I said, the players wouldn't go for it. But we'll see. No, I just thought that was funny that A-Rod, like I said, all of a sudden he's going to be an owner. He's like, hey, maybe we should pay players less. That would be cool. You just kind of thought that was funny. And speaking of things that could be funny, the MLB is apparently going to be pumping in crowd noise for their games once the season restarts. So we'll talk about that, talk about whether I like it, dislike it, how it's worked, because other teams have done it for their inter-squad scrimmages and stuff like that. So we'll talk about all of that right after the break. So stay right there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So, Major League Baseball, taking a cue from 2 European soccer leagues, will play with crowd noise from its official video game through ballpark sound systems during games. Like I said, once a season. Talk back up, and I guess in about a week now, I think. Yeah, I think it's like the 24th? Somewhere around there. But yeah, obviously the game is MLB The Show, if you didn't know. Exclusive to PlayStation, so if you're an Xbox guy, sorry to hear that, because you don't get to play. Stadium sound engineers will have access to around 75 different effects and reactions according to MLB, which has provided teams with crowd sounds captured from MLB The Show, like I said. San Diego Studios, a branch of Sony Interactive Entertainment, compiled the noise during games over several seasons. Clubs started using the sounds during summer camps and will be able to test them further during exhibition games. There's some reticence, that's what it is, when you first talk about crowd noise in an empty ballpark because you don't want to do something that is distracting, said Chris Marinak, who is the MLB's Executive Vice President of Strategy, Technology, and Innovation. It is heard in a way that is natural with the play of the game, and on the field the sounds do match what is happening. England's Premier League and Spain's La Liga were the first to return to action with crowd sound from video games. The leagues enlisted EA Sports to provide crowd effects they engineered from the FIFA games. Marinak said MLB talked to multiple companies before deciding to go with Sony, though, I mean, Sony has, like, the official game, so that'd be kind of weird if they didn't. Baseball is hoping the crowd noise, along with the stadium announcers' walk-up music and in-stadium video, will replicate the in-game experience as closely as possible without real fans in the stadium. Some ballparks are also offering fans a chance to buy photo cutouts that will be placed in the stands. I think, yeah, some foreign leagues, some foreign soccer leagues did that as well. I forget if it was Bundesliga or another one of the foreign leagues, but I know they did that as well with the cutouts, which was kind of funny. Brewers infielder Eric Sogard said Thursday that the crowd noise did help step up the competition for some guys during inter-squad games. You're still focused on the game, but that noise is very helpful. I could tell the first few scrimmages were with pure silence was tough for guys, he said. You could hear the other dugout talking. It was just kind of awkward. The sounds will also be audible on radio and television. The Korean Baseball League pipes in crowd noise. So they do it as well at stadiums, so they are not completely silent, but is barely audible during games aired on ESPN. So like I said, just kind of weird. A lot of people are leery of artificial crowd noise because it takes away a unique opportunity to hear players' conversations during games, which is a separate point, which we will also talk about. Alex Rodriguez, again, he's just been all over the stuff, noted during an ESPN conference call that the only time fans can hear the type of interaction is if they go to spring training workouts. ESPN announcer Matt Vasgersian, who's also in the game, is hopeful there still might be some sort of audio sweet spot to provide a little bit of everything. Which, again, maybe there will be. And I know the NBA has talked to 2K about letting them use stuff from their sound library when play resumes in the bubble. So we'll see if they go with that. But yeah, so artificial crowd noise. I know this is, I think it was because Christian Yelich, there was like a funny moment from him over the weekend where he was getting booed when he was walking to the plate and he was like, what am I, in Wrigley Field or something like that? It was just kind of, because I think he was mic'd up too at the time, so that's why it was even funnier because like he was able to get you were able to actually hear his reaction before you just have to he would just be mouthing the words or whatever, so you would have trouble knowing. But so like I'm saying that it provides an interesting experience in that regard, because I mean, any sport with artificial sound, any sport with no fans, period, is going to be strange. I've said that already on this podcast. That's not anything new from my perspective. It's already going to be strange. So what can we do to make it less strange? And I think potentially bringing crowd noise in so it's not completely silent during the games, especially during baseball, might be one of those. Because, when you think about football, all right, you don't need that. You could use it, but you don't need it necessarily because, players are going to call things out. Players are going to be yelling signals, making checks at the line, doing all those other things. So it's not going to be completely silent in between plays. Same thing basketball. People are going to be calling out plays, making defensive adjustments, calling out who's got where, if we're going to switch, if you're going to switch, you're not going to switch, where the pick's coming from, where the screen's coming from, stuff like that. So, and like I said, you're dribbling the ball. And plus, like most NBA games, like there's music being played throughout most of the game anyway. Again, it's not the same as a crowd, but again, there's no noise. So it's like, do you need an artificial sound? Maybe, maybe not. But when you come to baseball, like, unless somebody's saying something in the dugout, it is quiet. Now again, I don't play baseball up through high school. So I know, like, back then we're still doing, like, the little chants or doing, or saying things in between pitches to the pitcher or, like, whoever. Or you're on the bench, batters are up. I'm not saying that they don't do that now, but I just know I can't say for certain that they do. I haven't been to a baseball game in a while, and even if I am there, the last game I went to was years ago, and I was, like, up in the bleachers somewhere, so it's not like I'm that close to the field to know what they are and aren't saying. Or to be able to hear what they are or aren't saying. Like I said, I don't want to make any assumptions or accusations about that. But generally speaking, it's fairly silent in between pitches. And again, that's with fans in the stands already. Now, again, there's not a whole lot of cheering from a pitch-to-pitch standpoint. You kind of cheer when, like, a big strikeout happens or a big hit happens, somebody hits a home run, stuff like that. Like, in between pitches, like, all right, if it's a ball, no one says anything. If it's a strike, that people with the home crowd might clap, and then like vice versa. So it's not like there's a lot of sound anyway, but with nothing there, when those big moments happen, like it's gonna be dead silent. As after like a big moment or a big strikeout or anything, when people walk to the stands or people walk or people run on the bases or like walk to the dugout, stuff like that, and that's just gonna be awkward, in my opinion. Like I said, everyone may feel differently about this. But when it comes to baseball, I completely understand why you'd want to pump in the artificial noise. It's like, again, what other sounds are you hearing? Like, okay, you hear the crack of the bat, you hear like the thud of when the ball hits the glove. But outside of that, like, what are you hearing regularly throughout the game? Not a whole lot. And I think that's kind of why they want to do this. So it's like, you don't want it just to be silent. As like I said, the one Brewers infield, Eric Sogard, said, like, it was just awkward. Like, how do you get juiced up for a game when it's like, just like, you're just going, it just feels as if you're going through the motion, because it's like, again, there's just nothing going on. And especially since a lot of these guys were, not everybody were like a big time high school player. But like, I mean, even in high school, even in Little League, you play in front of fans. It's not like there's no one there. Like, you're playing in front of some fans. It's not like, again, the thousands of people you're playing at an MLB stadium or playing in front of in an MLB stadium, but it's not like nothing. And then same thing with high school, same thing in these college games they went to. Minor league games, probably it's a little shaky depending on where you're at. But again, once you get to a certain level, it's like there's crowds everywhere, and decent sized crowds. So now you go from that to like literally nothing. And it's not like you can like, and it's not like you could just like, just start playing music all the time, something like that, like the NBA does, because that's not what happens during a game. You don't want to, like I said, you don't want to completely make it a brand new thing, but you want to be able to add in a little bit of flavor in there somehow. Like I said, if not, then it's just going to be like dead silence the whole time. That's just going to be strange, personally. Though, I do understand Matt Vasgersian's point to where you kind of want to find a sweep spot. I do think now, like when they do those like interviews on the field during like the All-Star game, they would do where they would like interview guys and talk with them through their time in the field or through their time at bat or whatever. And those are cool because, like, again, you don't really get to hear much from these players in terms of like outside of the field. Like, you might hear like some post game, but like you don't see these guys on like doing that many commercials. You don't see these guys, like, again, they're not like big presences on social media. I mean, well, I don't want to say that because like I know Trevor Bauer was kind of big on social media. Like, a couple guys are, but I'm saying like everybody follows like the Stephs and the LeBrons and the Mahomeses and the Lamar Jacksons and like the Russell Wilsons of the world. Granted, Russell Wilson's married to a singer, so that definitely helps. Not everybody can do that, but I'm just saying, like, again, just like the presence in pop culture that these other athletes have is much greater than the ones that baseball players have. Which is unfortunate for them. But I'm saying now this is going to be the perfect time to allow their personalities to show, to be like, all right, this is a cool guy. Let me go follow him. Let me go Follow him on Twitter. Let me go follow him on Instagram. Let me like see what he does off the court. See if he has like a Twitch channel, or see if he like YouTube channel. See if he streams games. See if he does this or does that. Has a podcast, whatever. JJ Redick has a podcast and does it while also playing basketball. So I'm saying like you don't really, not to say that it doesn't happen with baseball players. Like I don't want to just come out here and flat say no baseball players have a podcast or stuff like that. But then you just don't hear about it as much, or they don't have the same presence as much. Like you don't. It's just like one of those things where you're trying to grow the popularity of the sport and make it relatable to young guys. And all right, you kind of want to be able to showcase them in a way that's relatable. And this could be that way when you have these conversations and you talk with them. You see like, all right, this guy's funny or this guy's cool and laid back. Like you want to be able to see those type of things. And I think now, and like again to Matt Vesker's point, now during this time where you're going to have a lot of silence throughout the game, now would be a good time to just like, all right, liven it up for the broadcast. So at least you're hearing something other than just the announcers for 9 innings. Potentially more. So like, at least that gives you something. Like I said, just give you something to hear, something to listen to. Because again, if it's just silence the whole time, it's going to be awkward. No one's going to want to listen to that. No one's going to want to watch that. In my opinion. Again, we'll see what happens when these sports come back. But like, no one's going to like care that much. If it's just like, if you're just going to be sitting in silence watching baseball for 3 hours. I don't think. I at least know, and like I said, it's even worse now because normally they're on when nothing else is on. Like now, like literally every sport other than football is going to be starting up or going on. And most of the other sports will be in their playoffs. So people will care more about that. Then by the time you're late into your season, now football is back on, potentially, if that happens. Because, cases are still spiking. So yeah, now I'm saying now people just won't care anymore. So you kind of got to find a way to make people care. And this could be you doing something innovative or cool or interesting within your games. Could be that thing that make people go, all right, let me tune in. Let me watch this game. Let me watch like these two guys that I don't know much about. Then again, you learn more about them. Then you come back and watch them more. And then like it becomes a whole thing. And then like all of a sudden now you have lifelong fans. From, like I said, just something that should be pretty simple. So we'll see how the manufactured crowd noise goes, but I think if there was ever a sport that could use it, it would be the MLB, in my personal opinion. So that makes sense. Speaking of video games, I don't do much video game talk on here because I really just play sports games, which I guess you could talk about. It's a sports podcast, but I don't really because I'm just like, I don't know how much everybody likes video games. So at least I know most of you guys like sports in general. So there's that, but not everybody plays video games. But regardless, I've rambled on enough about that. Madden Rings came out. And, a lot of people weren't happy about them. The 99 Club, they're all happy, and then a couple other people who got their ratings inflated a little bit. But there are a lot of people that I think, that were actively mad. A lot of people, whether they're players or within the Madden community, that were mad. And also there's some people that didn't really say much, but I'm just going to go through some of the guys that I think should be mad about their rating. I'm not going to go through everybody, because like I said, there's a lot. But I'm just going to run through some of the guys that I think got rated far too low. Or just too low compared to what someone else at their position or someone else at the same skill level got. So we'll talk about all that right after the break. Stay right there.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
GSMC Podcast Network. So, like I said, I want to preface this by saying that the Madden guys get a lot of flack for a lot of things. They got a lot of flack for when they released their official franchise notes for this upcoming year, wherein they basically didn't really update anything. Everyone was mad about that. The hashtag Fix Madden franchise started. They had to kind of say that they're going to change some things up. We'll see what they do and don't change. They get a lot of flack for the gameplay, a lot of flack for the ratings, and honestly, it's all warranted. In my opinion, 100% warranted. They deserve every single bit of slack they get because the game, not great. Now, do people buy it because there's really just no one else and most football fans just want to play some sort of video game about football? Yes, 100%. That's why they've been able to put out a subpar product for years and no one really do anything about it. Same thing kind of with 2K. 2K is suffering from the similar scenario, but at least they're like, career mode's a little bit better. But just the same thing where like their game isn't that great anymore, but it's like either you don't play anything, which is definitely an option, or you kind of stick it out, and that's why. And then plus they with the same thing with kind of like 2K does with like the VC and stuff, which is like the virtual currency, where it's basically how you purchase anything, purchase upgrades, purchase clothes, purchase gear for the games, purchase gear to just walk around like the playground or the blacktop or wherever. That's kind of, you have to spend money to get that. Well, if you don't want to, let me say, if you don't want to grind and then start from like a 50, 60 overall and work your way up to a 99, if you want to kind of just do things a little more quicker, then you pay money here, money there to purchase some VC and to kind of, again, to make it go by a little quicker. And then similar thing you do with like the Madden Ultimate Team, just like where you create your own team and like play people online and things like that. I don't know. I don't play much, but I just know a lot of it's microtransaction related, where like they charge people and you can get, and especially for kids, you can get kids to be like, hey, like borrow a parents' credit card and pay for things, and all of a sudden they're racking up, excuse me, hundreds of dollars on their parents' credit card, and Madden is continuing to make money, so they're not going to complain about it. But yeah, so there's a lot of flack that these sports franchises get, and every single bit of it is completely warranted, in my personal opinion, because these games need to do better. I mean, they just took out that competition. I mean, one of them said they didn't take out, 2K didn't take out NBA Live, but NBA Live just kind of fell to the wayside, and then it just hasn't really recovered. And then like EA just like somehow got the rights to be the only one to create like sim style football games. So then 2K was out, even though the NFL 2K5 was probably the best football game I remember playing, at least as a kid. It was great. I remember I went back and played it like a couple years after, like in like 2000, like when like Madden 07 or 08 was out, and I'm like, wow, this game still kind of holds up. Again, the rosters rolled and stuff like that, but I was like, there are modes I didn't even utilize that I should have utilized more and stuff like that. That was great. I think I broke like the rookie rushing record my rookie year. It was a great time. And then, like I said, similar with NCAA. I mean, again, it's different scenarios because of the whole likeness situation. That's why they have to shut it down. But a lot of people were playing that up in NCAA 14, mind you, up until like this year, just because they liked that game better, and because they update whoever was in charge of the service updated the rosters every year, so they liked that game better than they like Madden. People were still playing a 6-year-old game because it was comparable, if not better, than Madden. So, like I said, these video game companies or franchises deserve every bit of flack they get. So when people were out here complaining about Madden ratings, while to the average person it's like, why would you complain about that? To a person like me who plays the game, I'm like, yes, these ratings are terrible. Not everyone, but some of these ratings were terrible. So I'm like, I'm not even mad that you're complaining. So, well, like I said, I'll go through some of these. I can't go through everybody that deserves a higher rating because there's a lot, especially based off last season. Because it's weird how they judge it. You would think it's like, all right, you would base it on this past season, like the most recent season should be how it's graded. But then when you see somebody like J.J. Watt being the second highest rated defensive lineman, and you're like, whoa, hold on, J.J. Watt has not been that good the last 3 to 4 years. Granted, because he's been hurt, and he hasn't even been on the field. How can you warrant him being one of the best players in the game? especially the best player, one of the best players at his position. Like, all right, so boom, let me look it up. And so this was coming off of, this was 2019, like Madden 20. All right, cool, makes total sense. He had 16 sacks in 2018. Granted, he was healthy for the first time. He had 16 sacks. This past year, he had 4 sacks, only played in 8 games. Year before, in 2017, played 5 games. 2016, played 3 games. So not even coming off of a good year. And he's still, like I said, the second, I'm pretty sure he was like a 97, 98 overall. And you're just like, how is that possible? But yeah, I'm not even talk about the defensive linemen, some of the ones that got shafted, Danielle Hunter being a prominent one. And we'll start with the quarterbacks, because that's where the shafting started. So, Lamar Jackson, and reigning MVP, the cover athlete, 94 overall. Now, was that bad? No, not at all. But like, and I'm not saying like he's not better than Mahomes. I don't think he's better than Russell Wilson. But 94, like at least he should be a little bit closer. The man just won. He's the reigning MVP. Like give him a 95, 96, something like that. If Mahomes is 99, obviously, and then Russ is 97, like there shouldn't be that big of a gap between them. So there's already that. You got a little bit further in the list. So you got in the top 10 quarterbacks, you got Watson, Dak, and Wentz. They make up like 8, 9, and 10. Sean's an 86, Dak's an 84, Wentz is an 84. All those ratings are like whatever. Like they're not like that great, but they're not like absolutely horrid either. But then you look at like Tom Brady, who is a 90, or Aaron Rodgers, who's an 89, or even Drew Brees, who's like a 93. I mean, Drew Brees was pretty good last year, but he did miss some games. But when it comes to Brady and Rodgers, you could argue that Deshaun, Dak, and Wentz were better than both of those guys this past season. Now, again, over the course of their careers, no. I mean, even Aaron Rodgers being below Tom Brady based off last season, like, I mean, not that he was great, Aaron Rodgers was, but I mean, the team was good. They made it to the AFC Championship game. He had better stats than Tom Brady. Like, how do you, and just because he got, like, just because he moved and should be better this year, now you're going to bring him ahead of him? Like, just like weird. And also, like I said, with Dak and Wentz and Watson, it's like, how are they that much worse? Like I said, Dak and Wentz are an 84 and Drew Brees is a 93. Like, Drew Brees is not that much better than those guys. And I think that's kind of where they fall into issues. It's like, they need to, like again, they try to, like, tone down their ratings. That's why, like, the rookies are lower and everything else now. But I'm like, at the same time, for the top guys, you scale the ratings up too high for some of them. It's like, so then, like, you have the guys at the top are much higher than they potentially should be. And the guys below them are much lower because you don't want to have everybody at like a 95 or 94 or stuff like that. Like, I get it. But I'm just saying, like, you can't tell me Drew Brees current Drew Brees, who, again, people thought they could replace with Taysom Hill because he was the best quarterback on the field in the playoff game between the Saints and Falcons, is 9 overall points better than Dak and Wentz and 7 overall points better than Deshaun Watson. Again, I think he's probably better than them right now if he's healthy, but not by like that. Like 9 overall points is a big gap. That's between a bencher. I mean, a bench player and a starter. That's how big the gap is. And I'm just saying, I don't think the gap's that big. So those quarterbacks at the bottom, they got a bone to pick. And the similar scenario with the ratings gap is that, so running backs, Josh Jacobs was like an 88, I believe. Which is too high. Whatever. But again, alright, Josh Jacobs was good. He was the main catalyst behind the Raiders offense last year before he got hurt. Cool. Completely understand that. But to get hurt, like that did happen. And then you have Miles Sanders, who, again, I'm not saying he's necessarily better than Josh Jacobs, because I mean that's all relative. I mean, Raiders fans will say he's definitely better. Eagles fans will say he's definitely better. So you can't, like I said, it's hard to say for certain because it all kind of depends on your personal preference. But again, he wasn't that much worse than him last year, especially when you factor in how much more he did in the passing game and how much he did down the stretch. Because again, Josh Jacobs wasn't there, not his fault, but he was hurt. While Miles Sanders didn't have to carry because Carson Wentz played well as well, but he was like the biggest offensive weapon when like all their receivers were down and like Zach Ertz had to miss some time. Like, he was their best offensive weapon on a team that won on a 4-game winning streak to get into the playoffs. He was their best offensive weapon, like bar none, not even close. Well, I mean, Boston Scott. When he wasn't in Boston Scott was arguably number 2. Well, Greg Ward was up there too. But yeah, you could argue easily that Miles Sanders was their biggest offensive weapon, or the best offensive weapon down the stretch to win. And he's an 80. Now again, I don't think Miles Sanders needs to be that much higher. It should be like maybe like an 82. Probably somewhere like that. Just like give him a little bit bump. But I'm saying if you're saying Josh Jacobs is an 88, like there's no way based off just last season, because it's not like they have like careers, like it's not like these one you give somebody a Super Bowl bump, you give them a playoff bump, anything like that. A Madden like cover bump, like none of these guys have that. And just based off last season, Josh Jacobs is 8 overall points better than Miles Sanders. That's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. I'm sorry. Like, that's absurd. And that's not even where it ends. That is not even where it ends. T.J. Watt was, I believe, an 86 overall. If I could find it. 86 overall. T.J. Watt. Same T.J. Watt that was up for Defensive Player of the Year, I believe. The same T.J. Watt that helped lead, along with Minka Fitzpatrick, who we will get to, who helped lead, or help the Steelers have one of the best defenses in the league. Same T.J. Watt, that had 8 forced fumbles last year. Same T.J. Watt that had 14.5 sacks last year. Same T.J. Watt that was a Pro Bowl last year. That was a first-team All-Pro last year. That same T.J. Watt was an All-Pro at defensive end, and then a first-team All-Pro at defensive end, a second-team All-Pro at linebacker. That same T.J. Watt is somehow an 86. Well, again, his brother, who he was significantly better than last year, it was like a 97, 98 overall, something like that. Somewhere in the high 90s. It's like what are we doing here? Like, how does that work? How does T.J. Watt, arguably the best pass rusher, depending on him, Chandler Jones, Shaquille Barrett, some other guys you could throw in there. Myles Garrett was good too before he got suspended. Like, there's some other guys you could throw in there, but arguably the best pass rusher, or edge rusher, I should say, in the league last year, the entire NFL, is an 80. Is not even a 90. Is an 86. There's a lot of people ahead of him that are defensive players, and it's like, just how does that work? How is that possible? And again, you would think this is supposed to be based in some sort of reality. Like, all right, you're basing this off of this past season. Like, all right, that's what it should be, right? At least, like, all right, we're going to base it off the past season. How the guys played the past year is kind of how they reflect, and then again, you change. That's the other thing. It's like the fact that the Madden has to change, and the same thing with 2K, they have to change so much once the season starts, kind of tells you how bad they started out to begin with. Like, you should have to send out massive patches or make massive ratings upgrade. Again, people, you're allowed to adjust people's ratings as the season goes along, because obviously you want to, as they're playing well, you want to reflect that in the game. But if you're going to do that, then, like, all right, just base it off last season and try to judge from there. Again, you can't have everybody be 90s. I get that. But if at least you have a guy that's on a first team All Pro, like, don't have him be an 86 if you're going to be a realistic sports video game. If that's your whole point, your only sports video game, your sim style, like, you want to be authentic. You want to be an authentic video game. How can you do that when you're not rewarding the players that had good years, and you're rewarding guys based off of really just legacy? And the same thing happened with Minka Fitzpatrick. He wasn't even a top 10. I think he was like an 88, 87, something like that. But he wasn't even a top 10, like, defensive back. Madden rating, or top 10 safety, I should say. Like I said, he's below Earl Thomas, below Micah Hyde, below Eddie Jackson, well below guys like Harrison Smith and Tyrann Mathieu and Jamal Adams. Even Derwin James kind of got shafted, but he was hurt. So I'm like, all right, I kind of get that. But there's no way you could tell me Minka Fitzpatrick, who, again, I'm not going to say for certain that he was the main reason that the Steelers defense turned it around. But I know once he got there, he was sensational. Had 5 interceptions, including 1 touchdown. Had 9 pass defenses. Had a forced fumble, two fumble recoveries, and a touchdown there. Had about, 60 tackles, tackle for loss, quarterback hit, led to a Pro Bowl, and was an All-Pro. First team at safety. And he's, I think, like I said, high 80s, 88, 87, something like that. Like, how does that make any sense? How does that make any sense? You know how? It doesn't. That's the whole point. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it should be based on some sort of... Like, there's no way you can tell me Earl Thomas was better than Minkah Fitzpatrick last year. Zero chance you would tell me that. Again, arguably the best safety in the entire league. And you can't at least give him a 90? Again, you're supposed to be authentic. How is that authentic? And then don't even get me started on Trey White. And again, these are just the people I talked about. There's a lot more people to go on than just the people I talked about. But so you got Trey White, who, by like every measure or everybody's opinion, was the second best cornerback in the league last year. Second best. Again, I think that's a pretty standard. Everyone kind of agrees in that regard. He was the second best cornerback. He is, I think, a 90. Dang, I'm mad I can't find the graphic now. Oh yes, I found it. So he's a 90 overall. Fine, that's not bad. But you got Jair Alexander tied with him at a 90, and Jair Alexander was fine last year, but I don't know if he's that high. Especially when again Trey White's a 90. You got Jalen Ramsey ahead of him, who was, I think, better towards the end, but even when like his season wasn't like that great, honestly. Especially when he first got to the Rams. His season wasn't that great. He's 94, and Richard Sherman's 92, and again, he had a good season, but again, when Trey White was the second best corner in the league, literally by every measure, his stats are very similar to what Stephon Gilmore put up, and he's a 99. So that's what I'm saying. Either you bring these top guys down or you have to bring these lower guys up, because there's no way Stephon Gilmore was the best corner in the league. Fine. I'm not going to argue. I'm not even going to argue with the fact he should be 99. That's fair. I get that. But you can't tell me he's 9 overall points better than Trey White. How is that possible? When they were 1A, 1B, 1 and 2. At the very least, if you're going to have him be 99, at least have him a little bit higher up, not him tied at 4. When again, he was the second best safety in the league. That's what it should be based on. It should be based on the past season. Like, alright, how good was this guy this past year based on where we had him at last year? Alright, cool, we'll bring him up. Alright, cool, we'll bring him down. Well, but based on where he ended the season. Because then, alright, from where he ended the season, alright, so then that's kind of should be a gauge on where he should be at starting the next season. And I get that, but again, you see people make all-pro teams, things like that, Pro Bowls, help their team play good in playoffs, win a Super Bowl, stuff like that. Like, alright, you can give them a bump for that. And that's obviously not what Trey White had with the playoffs and stuff, but still, I'm just like, how is Trey White the arguably the second best corner in the league last season? Just last season, because that's what the game should be based on. That should be based on, shouldn't factor in years prior. It's like, alright, how good were they based on where we had them last season? Or how good were they based on last season? Like, rank them that way. Like, again, it's all subjective. But there was little subjection when it comes to who was the best corners. It was Trey White and it was Stephon Gilmore. And that was really it. Their numbers were very identical. They both matched up against the same caliber receivers in terms of they always were with the number one guy. Both had 6 picks. Both didn't give up that many yards. Both had a low passer rating against. And stuff like that. Again, Stephon Gilmore may have been higher in some categories and Trey might have been higher in others. But relatively speaking, they were about the same. So how is one 9 overall points better? Again, this is Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders situation. It's like, all right, you want to give one guy his credit for being good, that's fine. But then don't shun the other guy by putting him so much lower when they're at a similar level. And that's all people they just want, like, realism in the games. That's why people have issues, and I don't want to go on too long about this. I've probably already gone too long. But it's just like, what do we do? as sports video games fans, because like there's nowhere to go. Like if you don't buy anything, you just don't play sports games. Which I mean is an option, but I mean, hey, especially if that Rona hit in the fall and there's no sports, you don't need something to play. But then it's just like, how can you continue to play when clearly what they're putting in is not worth the money? This is how we're going to start the game, and like I said, not even talking about the franchise mode stuff and all the other issues that people have had. Then, like, if we can't even get the ratings right, or it's close to right, again, everyone's going to have a different opinion, so it's not going to be completely perfect. But it's like, if we can't even get that close to right, how can we expect them to get anything right? It's like, how can you expect anything? It's really just a shame. Because Madden and 2Ks and all these other sports franchises, they used to be like, oh, so you look forward to them. Now you're just like, people just buy them because I don't want to say it's like a drug, but it's like an addiction. It's just like, we just need something to play. This is all we got. And this is what we get back. This is what the loyal customer gets back. These type of people, whoever they are, being in charge of deciding these ratings and deciding what gets put into a game or what doesn't get put in, when clearly I'm not going to judge anybody's credentials or anything like that, but one could argue how much these guys really know about football. That's all. I'm not going to say I know more than them, because I don't know how much they do or don't know, but I'm just saying, when you see stuff like this, it just comes into question. That's all. From the outside world, it just comes into question. But again, I've gone on too long about this. I could go on for like another 20 minutes, because that's how much Madden annoys me now. But I will stop here. So that has been it for the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you guys for listening, as you always do. Like you've heard today, like you've heard in past episodes, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you like what you hear, give us a 5-star rating. Rest nice review. Very appreciated, very helpful. I'll see if you guys like the way we can improve, all that fun stuff. Also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. We can talk about Madden ratings, we can talk about Madden in general, sports games in general, how they've all gone downhill, and how we're just kind of stuck buying them. Or, we don't have to. As we talked about, money is power. So if we don't buy the games, they get hit in their pockets and they've realized, oh, we're losing money, that'll cause them to change. Talk about the Washington situation, kind of like, do you think Dan Snyder's going to have to sell the team? I think that's a very realistic possibility that they might be able to force him out. They did it with Jerry Richardson. Though again, he was involved. I think that's the only thing that's going to be hard, just because he wasn't the one directly doing any of these acts. Jerry Richardson was involved. Donald Sterling was involved. Those kind of guys weren't involved in the act. So it's like, because he can claim ignorance, it's like, is that going to be enough to get him to skate by? It shouldn't. Like I said, people look for a reason to get Daniel Snyder out of here for a while now, and this might be the opportunity. We're talking about that. Talk about players leaving the bubble. How you think it's going to affect teams. We can talk about crowd noise. If you think the artificial crowd noise is going to be good or bad for baseball. Again, we won't discuss any of that with you guys. So yeah, we can talk about that. And then yeah, so before I get out of here, I just want to, as always, give my shout out to the essential workers, EMTs, firefighters, doctors, nurses, grocery store people, delivery drivers, retail workers, warehouse workers, whoever's been deemed essential, whoever's had to work through this pandemic. Shout out to you, because again, you're doing a lot of the legwork here. Keeping stores open, keeping people safe, treating people, dealing with rude customers, all that stuff that no one would want to deal with. You're doing it, and you're doing it in the middle of a pandemic. So I got to give you credit for that, because you're doing jobs that most other people wouldn't even consider doing at this time right now. So shout out to you guys. You're probably not getting paid enough for what you're having to go through at this moment. So shout out to you. Again, just wear a mask. You want to watch sports in the fall, just wear a mask. Well, mainly football, because everything else is coming back. But if you want to watch football, wear a mask. People saying if you all it takes is like 1 2 months, everybody just wear a mask when they go out. You maintain proper levels of sanitation. We could have it quelled. And again, it's not going to be gone, but we just have more under control than we do now, because we don't really have it under control at all. So there's that. But yeah, I've been Chris Blades. That has been my time. And until next time, it's out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.